Does checking your own credit report lower your credit score? What is the 30-day rule that you must know when shopping for a loan? And how can Ernest Hemingway help improve your writing? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 42nd episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey everybody, welcome to the 42nd episode of the DoughRoller Podcast. It's hard to believe it's episode number 42. I started this back in November. In fact, the first episode was with my good friend Ryan from Cash Money Life. And he's a veteran. He was in the Air Force, and the first episode was on Veterans Day, and we talked about benefits of military members that they can get. And so it's amazing that in that time we've reached the 42nd episode, and it kind of hit me. I got an email from a listener the other day, and they said, "Hey Rob, when I go into iTunes, I only see the latest 10 episodes. Why is that? I'd like to I can get them all on your website, but I'd like to download them to my iPhone, and I'm only seeing the last 10. And so I went into iTunes and I saw other podcasts had up to 100 listed. And I thought, well, why is mine limited to 10? And it turned out it was a setting that I had on my website that limited what's called the feed, the RSS feed, which is just the technology that sends these podcasts to iTunes. I had limited it to 10. Well, I changed that. It's now at 100, and so all the episodes are there in iTunes. In fact, the easy way to find it is just go to doughroller.net/iTunes, and that redirects you to the iTunes page where this podcast resides. But I was grateful for the reader because I didn't have a clue that I had limited the episodes to just 10 in iTunes. And of course, as soon as I changed it, the number of downloads spiked significantly, as I guess you would expect. I guess we live and learn, right? So you'll find them all there now. And today we're going to cover a topic. A reader had emailed me some time ago and asked me this question. And it was, does checking your credit report hurt your credit score? Now, for some, it's a good question. They're not sure. Some of you listening may say, I already know the answer to that. Well, I'm going to guarantee you that if you listen to this whole podcast, you'll learn something new, even if you know the answer to that question, which I'll come to in a minute. I guarantee it, or your money back. There you go. Before we get to that question, in fact, this may be the first thing you learn, the tool of the day. This came to me. I have a lot of friends that blog. In fact, a group of us met in St. Louis over the past weekend, and it was a lot of fun. And you learn a ton about blogging when you meet with other bloggers. They have different experiences, different expertise. But this was an interesting tool that actually doesn't have anything to do with finances, at least not directly, although it could help you in your career. And so I wanted to mention it, and I'm going to actually mention a tool every show or some kind of interesting tool or resource on every podcast. And most of them will probably deal with finance. Some will be paid, some will be free. But this one is a free tool, and it's not directly related to finance, and it's called HemingwayApp.com. Hemingway is in Ernest Hemingway, right? HemingwayApp.com. And if you go to that site, it's a very plain-looking site, really. And when you go to it for the first time, you'll see some text in the middle of the screen, a little prose, if you will, and some of it's highlighted. And what this does is you can take something that you've written and type it into this website, and it will make suggestions for you as to how you can improve it. And I found this to be extremely useful and quite good. And what it does is, for example, if sentences are too long and it makes them too complicated, it suggests that you shorten them. It highlights all your adverbs. Adverbs can really bog down writing. It highlights verbs that aren't very powerful. It highlights passive voice versus active voice. And the nice thing about this, I was, an English major for better or worse, but you don't have to be, and if you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute, what's the difference between passive and active voice? I'm trying to remember from 8th grade. You don't have to worry about that. You can just paste your writing, whether it's something you're writing for work or whatever, into this tool, and it will give you some good suggestions on how to improve it. So that's HemingwayApp.com. The other thing it does is it gives you a readability score. So in the example text that you'll see when you go to the site, It does it by grade level. So this is grade 7. And the interesting thing is for most writing, you don't want the grade to be too high. That usually means you're using, big words and long sentences, and it just makes the writing harder to follow. So actually, grade 7 is a good score here, and I'm going to start putting my articles into this tool before I publish them. I'm a little nervous about that. We'll see. Maybe I should go back and put some old articles in this tool and see what it comes up with. But in any event, there you go. That's the tool of the day. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Okay. So does checking your credit report hurt your credit score? That's the question for the day. And I could do this. I could say, nope, it sure doesn't, and close the podcast. It doesn't hurt your credit score. That's the answer. But I think it's important to understand why. And in doing so, there's some nuances to how credit scores are calculated that can help you when it comes to shopping for a loan, like a car loan or a home loan. And so I want to cover that today. And the first thing I want to begin with is this. Some might be saying, wait a minute, why would that even be a question? Why would, checking your own credit report, we're not lenders, right? It's us. So why would checking our own credit report possibly lower our credit score? And here's the deal. Inquiries, that is when creditors check your credit report, that can actually hurt your score. Now, let me explain. Let's begin with simply what's an inquiry. So when you apply, say, for a credit card, the credit card company is going to pull your credit report, and they're going to check your credit score under some formula, usually FICO, but not always FICO, as part of their underwriting standards, as part of the process of determining, one, whether they're going to approve your credit card application, and two, under what terms, what interest rate, for example, they're gonna charge on that card. And the same process is very similar whether you're getting a credit card or a car loan or buying a home. Obviously, buying a home involves a lot more paperwork, but in terms of your credit report, the process is fairly similar. They pull your credit report and they check your credit scores. And the folks at FICO and the other credit scoring formulas have determined that inquiries, and particularly if you get a lot of inquiries in a short period of time, can be an indicator that a consumer is struggling financially. Now, why would that be? Well, the theory is perhaps you've lost a job or you're having some other financial struggles, and that's why maybe you're applying for a lot of credit in a short span of time. That's particularly true with revolving credit. If you're getting, a lot of credit cards, for example, or perhaps home equity line of credit and that sort of thing. And so to reflect that in the score, the models generally lower a credit score for inquiries when a potential creditor pulls your credit report. That's basically what an inquiry is. Now, of course, that leads to the question, well, how bad is it? How much will an inquiry lower your score? So here's the deal on that. First of all, there's no one answer. It's not as if the formula says, for each inquiry, your score will go down 10 points. It depends on your credit profile, your credit history, all the other factors that go in to make up your credit score. So there is no one sort of answer to how it will affect your score. That's number one. Number two, and I suppose good news, is that of all the factors that go into credit scoring formulas, inquiries are generally the least important. They will generally lower your score less than, generally significantly less than, say, late payments, for example. So of all of the factors, the inquiry is probably the least important. However, if you're planning, say, to buy a home in the next year, every point in your credit score matters. And so a few inquiries that might lower your score 5, 10, 15, 20 points, can have a big impact when it's time to go get a mortgage. So, but that's what an inquiry is, and that's sort of how it affects your score. But here's the thing for our purposes today, and that is not all inquiries are the same, and not all inquiries are triggered by your applying for credit. So, for example, you might apply for car insurance. Most car insurance companies pull your credit report. They use that, believe it or not, as a factor in their underwriting process to determine what your premiums are. But in that case, you're not applying for credit, right? You're not applying for a loan or a credit card. You're applying for car insurance. And so when the car insurance company pulls your report, they have a little code, an indicator, where they can say, look, this person's not applying for credit. We're doing this as part of a car insurance application, right? Another example would be those pre-approved offers we all get in the mail for credit cards and other things. Those oftentimes come from the company pulling information from your credit file. Again, you've not applied for credit. This is to send you a pre-approved offer, and so that's not going to hurt your credit score either. And a third example, and for our purposes today, is checking your own credit. When we check our own credit, we're not applying for a loan. We just want to see our credit report and perhaps our credit score to see where we stand, make sure everything's correct, make sure there are no errors and that sort of thing. And so that's another example where you're not applying for credit. And so that's why checking your own credit report won't lower or hurt your credit score. And all of these examples that I've given you, applying for car insurance, pre-approved offers, checking your own credit, the term they use for that is a soft pull. That's if you ever hear that term, or soft inquiry, that's an inquiry, and they call it a pull because you're pulling your credit report. Those sorts of inquiries don't hurt your credit score. The kind that do, you'll often hear described as a hard pull. Those are ones that are generated when you apply for credit, and those will lower your credit score. So you have a soft pull and a hard pull, and that's the difference. And again, checking your own credit would be considered a soft pull or soft inquiry. It won't hurt your credit score. Now, all of this sort of leads to sort of an interesting thing I want to kind of close with in terms of this issue for today's podcast, and that is, what about rate shopping? You know how you're going to apply for a car, for example, and you want to comparison shop to get the best rate you can. So maybe you apply for the loan and get a rate from the car dealer, but then you think, well, maybe I should check with my bank, and so you apply at your bank. And maybe you apply another place, and this is certainly true, say, for a home loan as well, where credit, your credit or the interest rate is so critical. You might apply to 2 or 3 or 4 different places. Do you really want to get the lowest rate? How does that work in terms of inquiries? And there's 2 issues here, and it's really important. This is where we get to that. I mentioned it, the 30-day rule at the beginning of this podcast. That's what we need to understand here. So here's how it works. First of all, when you apply for certain types of loans, like a home loan, or a car loan, or even a student loan, that inquiry, that would be a hard inquiry, right? Because you're applying, or a hard pull because you're applying for credit. That actually won't hurt your score, will not lower your score for 30 days. Now, there are some exceptions to the 30-day rule. I'll talk about that in a minute. But generally, it will not hurt your score, will not lower your score for 30 days. They sort of give you, think of it as a 30-day grace period. You say, well, why would they do that? Well, because they know that folks shop for credit. They shop for, and they put in multiple applications to get the best rate. And think of it this way. Let's say on day 1, you apply for a home loan at a bank, and you think, I want to shop, I want a comparison shop. So now on the 5th, you go apply somewhere else, see if you can get a better rate. Well, the loan that you applied for on the 1st, did that hurt your credit score so that now when you go in on the 5th at this second lender, they're actually seeing a lower credit score? And so the folks at FICO and credit scoring formulas generally, are aware that consumers obviously shop for the best deal, and they didn't want this process to hurt us. They didn't want it to lower our score. And so they said, okay, for 30 days, you can shop all you want, and none of these inquiries will affect your credit score for a 30-day grace period. Now, again, that only applies to certain types of loans. If you go and apply for a credit card, we don't rate shop for credit cards. You apply for a card, you say you get it or you don't get it. That's going to hurt your score. I say hurt. It's going to lower it. Again, depending on your situation, it may not be a lot, but it's going to lower your score right away. But for things where rate shopping is more common, again, mortgages, auto loans, student loans, you get this 30-day grace period so that you can apply at multiple places, each one not hurting your score, so you can sort of get an apples-to-apples comparison of the different lenders, all with your same sort of credit file, if you will. And then obviously you pick the loan, the terms that are best for you. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this helps us too, is that when the 30 days expires, then let's say you apply for a mortgage at 4 different places. You obviously aren't going to get 4 mortgages, right? You're going to get 1. So you apply at 4 different places. You pick the mortgage that's right for you. You've got your mortgage, and now this 30-day grace period expires. Do you get hit with 4 inquiries? Well, the answer is no. FICO's figured all that out. And they say, no, we understand you were rate shopping for a mortgage. You applied for 4, but you obviously only got 1. So we'll count that as 1 inquiry. They sort of bundle them. And they would do the same thing again with an auto loan. If you applied to 2 different places, you eventually got just 1 car loan. Once the 30 days expired, you should only show 1 inquiry on your report, or at least only one that affects your score, and that comes right from the folks at MyFICO. Now, I mentioned a 30-day grace period. Now, this is for you credit scoring ninjas. I don't know if you want to impress your friends at a party or whatever. Here's some details on this that are kind of interesting. FICO doesn't have just one formula. They modify this formula over time. They try to improve it as you would expect. And also, certain lenders have different formulas specific to them. But here's the thing. Back in the day, in one of the older FICO scoring formulas, the 30-day grace period was actually 14 days. So if you happen to apply at a lender who uses a very old FICO formula, they could be using 14 days. I think by and large, most folks are using, most lenders are using a more recent formula, and that's 30 days. Now, there's even a newer formula that's lengthened this period to 45 days. Now, my sense, just from what I've read in my research, particularly on the MyFICO website, it seems to me that most lenders are using this 30-day grace period. And if I were shopping for a loan, that's what I would try to stay within, as I'd get all my work done and my applications in and figure out what's best, again, whether it's a car loan, mortgage loan, whatever, within that 30-day period. But this is important to understand. It'll help you as you shop for important credit. Again, mortgage being the most important, I think, for most people. You want to be aware of this 30-day rule. Get your applications in. I would frankly try to get them in all at the same time. I'd figure out where I was going to apply. If it's going to be 2 or 3 different places, and I'd just do it all at the same time just to be safe. So there you go. Probably more than you ever wanted to know about credit inquiries, but I hope it helps. Obviously, if you have questions, just shoot me an email at DoughRoller.net. And I'm actually putting together a credit course that I'm going to run. It's just via email. It's going to be about 10 emails. You get one a day, all sort of basically educating folks about how credit scores work and how to get a credit score if you're just starting out, how to improve your credit score. I get a ton of questions, and I think it's just going to be easier rather than trying to craft unique answers every time I get these questions. I can just point folks to this credit course. And so I'm putting it up today, and you'll be able to go to it and sign up for it. It's just, like I said, it's an email course. It's free. There's no cost. And you'll find that at DoughRoller.net/credit course. All one word, DoughRoller.net/credit course. So there you go. Hopefully that'll be helpful to you. And as you get those emails, you can reply to any of them, and I'll get the email, and I'm happy to answer any questions or point you in a direction with some good resources or information. So that brings us to the last thing, and this is something I was doing in my weekly newsletter, but I thought I'd move it to the podcast, and that's the money tip of the day. So what's my money tip of the day? And it's this: prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And that can be applied to a lot of areas in our finances. You think about an emergency fund. That's really preparing for the worst, but of course you hope you never have to use it. How I want to apply it today is actually in a different area, and that's the stock market. So I'm recording this podcast. It's going to be published today, which is in early March 2014. You may be listening to this much later. But the stock market's at all-time highs. The S&P 500's hit a high. Everyone's, thrilled with their retirement accounts and portfolios as they see them going up and up. Last year, 2013, the S&P was up over 32% if you factor in dividends. And that's fine. That's good. It's fun. You look at your balances, and that's exciting, except that it's going to come down. They say in economics you should predict what or when, but never both. So I'm going to predict what. I'm not going to predict when. Because I have no idea. The stock market, though, is going to come down. It's going to lose 20%, 30%. Heck, it might lose 40%. I don't know when, and I don't know over what period of time, but I do know that everything reverts to the mean. And the stock market right now, whether you measure it by book value, the net worth of the market, price to earnings, the what we're currently paying for each dollar of earnings the company generates, whether you look at it, the stock market in comparison to GDP of the United States, if we're focused on, say, the S&P 500, whatever measure you use, the stock market is overvalued. Now, is it the worst it's ever been? No. But it's certainly quite high, quite above the averages, and it will revert to the mean. It's as simple as that. I don't know when, but it will. And I think we have to prepare ourselves. And for me, I don't go and change my asset allocation. I certainly look at it and make sure, am I comfortable with this? Because I think some hard times will be coming, and I am. But I do a couple of things. One is, I think the most important is just to prepare mentally. If you're at 80% stocks or 90% or some readers are 100%, look at your balance. Here's the key. Don't think to yourself, could I withstand a 40% loss? That's hard to really wrap your mind around. Instead, subtract 40% from your portfolio. If you've got $100,000 invested, ask yourself, will you stick to your asset allocation plan if that drops to 60? Or if you're at $1 million, would you stick to that plan if it dropped to 600? When you start to translate percentages into real dollars, it gets a lot more closer to home, and I think it allows us to evaluate. Okay, it's fine to sit here with an asset allocation plan, and you can read all the books, and you can listen to all the podcasts, and you can read all the blogs. But when the market drops 40% and my portfolio is now worth X, am I going to be so gung-ho with my asset allocation plan? The answer is no. I think now's the time to look at it. If the answer is yes, good for you. You're set. You're ready to go. Just be ready, because I think the stock market will be coming down. I don't know how much. I think it'll be significant. I don't know when or over what period of time. This year could be great. It could be up another 30% this year for all I know. But markets revert to the mean. They always do. And eventually it will come back down. There will be some sort of correction. And I think now is the time to prepare mentally. And if that process leads you to think you need to make some changes to your asset allocation plan, it's better to do that now than when the stock market is falling. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. As always, you can reach me at dr@DoughRoller.net. You can subscribe to this podcast. Just go to DoughRoller.net/iTunes. That redirects you to the iTunes page where you can subscribe. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the newsletter. It goes out every Saturday. That's at DoughRoller.net/newsletter. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, until next time, the best thing money can buy. That's right. It's financial freedom.